Hi, Reiko. It's so nice to have you and to speak with you and to just learn the story behind your sake company there in DC and what you do. So tell me a little bit about that. Let's go ahead and kind of get started on this culture talk on Japan.
Sure. So thanks for having me, first of all. It's very nice to meet you.
Yeah.
And so DC Sakeko, we are e-commerce online beverage company. We specialize in beverages from Japan. So Japanese sake, and we start carrying shochu. And we have about 100 selections of sake, 10 or so for shochu, pretty much cover 31 prefectures in Japan. And we only deliver in DC right now, but we started our shop June 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. Of course, we didn't plan that, but it still happened. And but ever since then, been great finding some amazing sake loving community here in DC.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and tell me, I mean, I'm sure it's been a exciting, nerve-wracking, amazing year in different ways, but you're here and you've grown it to 100 different sakes, it sounds like, and shochu. I want to learn about that here. So the other question I had for you is kind of, out of what passion did this as kind of a cultural expression form for you? How did you get into this?
Yeah, so I have to talk about my other business that I had for past almost 15 years or so. I still do run the event company, and I work very closely with Japan-related organizations and Japan contents, including the Cherry Blossom festivals here in DC. So through that company, I was promoting sake because sake is Japanese culture too. It's a beverage, but it is a culture. So by promoting, I was from the small events to a larger events. We've been doing a lot of promotion, and people were very scared. 15 years ago, people were very scared of sake. But once they try it, I started to hear this eye-opening expressions, and they love it. And they would ask me, "Oh my gosh, this is so good. Where can I get it?" And the answer was there was no place. There are some great restaurants that served beautiful sake, but they can only carry certain amount. And there's not many beverage shops that carried sake in regular basis. So we would promote, but then we didn't have a place for people to go get it, enjoy at home. So that kind of it didn't bother me at the beginning, but starting around maybe 5 years ago, it really started to bother me. Wow, the trend is coming. Now the DC is part of the Michelin city. People are so open to these, new things and cultural things. And I felt like sake was missing out on the opportunity. So it just kind of drove me crazy. So I decided to be that solution and created this on the e-commerce site, so that I don't have to lock in with a brick and stone shop.
Right. Wow. Good. That's amazing that you took that upon yourself, and you're right. That I never thought of that. But when you think of the element itself, so whether it's a food or a beverage, it in itself is a culture. You're right. In a lot of ways, it has a following, or it has a certain way that people enjoy it, or certain regions that they desire that item from, or they know it. You know what I mean? So,
yes, and it's I say culture because the sake was created 1700, 1800 years and years ago. As a gift to God. Originally, it was so the farmers will give the sake to the God to wish for the harvest and things like that. And in Japan, sake, when the kids becomes 3 years old or 5 years old, becomes 3 or 5 years, 7 year old. At each marking point, we visit the shrine, and then we get the blessing from the god, which is the sake. We sip on the little sake. It was of course, back in historical time, little kids had a hard time growing up to that age, and it was a milestone that they celebrated through the god. So from that to, of course, wedding, we receive the sake from the god as a blessing, to the point where we enjoy sake. Like, I don't know if you've heard of hanami sake, which is a flower viewing sake. So when the cherry blossom blooms, there's a lot of Japanese people goes under the cherry tree, have a picnic and drink sake, celebrate. And then when the beautiful moon's out, we drink sake. When the snow falls, and then there's each specific, like a moon viewing sake or snow viewing sake. So it's really part of our living culture. The sake is just really like in our life.
Wow. This is the first time I've heard of that, and it's so rich, and I want to know more. So, tell me a little bit first. How do you? So the cultural story, getting a little bit into the,
sure,
your shop and the menu on the shop and the way it's, you offer things. My mind's blown. I didn't know that there was such significance, but also I see all these different types of rice and classes. And so if we want to start with kind of the cultural story behind your choices there for curating the sake, but also the shochu, we can split them up, but, your choices in curating those, and then how those are characterized in the different regions in Japan, whether it's regional popularity. You mentioned cultural milestones and familial type of celebrations, and let's go into that a bit more.
Sure. So the sake, in terms of a product, so I basically, just like I explained at the beginning, my background comes from the event and really promoting a Japan content and Japanese cultures and, performances and all that was my background. So this sake was a very important part of the culture that I felt like it was missing. Cherry Blossom Festival happens every year. We promote Japanese culture. We celebrate, but sake was missing from there. And it was something that was very important for Japanese culture. So, but in terms of a sake selection on my website, I choose only the ones that I've tasted, and you'll see how many I tasted. I'm a professional drinker, but I am not.
That's great. Yeah. That's awesome. That's
I say I have a PhD in drinking.
Yeah. Hey, it's cultural, right?
Yeah.
It's celebration. It's cultural.
Yeah. So I only select the ones that I've tasted and I drank it. I don't know. I'm still a student myself when it comes to learning about the making of sake and the story of each brewers. There's so much stories from each brewers that been around from 1600s and 1800s, 1700s. There's a lot of historical stories from each sake, and that is the story in the bottle. So I try to pick up on that as well. It's a one step deeper into just trying to introduce sake as a culture as a whole.
So if we talk about the shochu, what's the difference between that and sake? What's the biggest defining qualities that you would say between those?
Yeah, so sake and shochu, they're both our national drinks. But the biggest difference is two biggest differences. One is sake is made only from rice water, and then there's koji and other elements in it too. But the main portion is rice and clean water. So whenever there you see a beautiful hot springs in Japan, you probably find a great sake brewers around that area. It's just has to go with the water. Now with the shochu and then sake is usually around 16% in alcohol. So it's a little bit shy above the wines category. Whereas in shochu, it's a distilled beverage. Sake is brewed beverage brewery, where shochu is distilled. So it has a little bit higher in alcohol. So usually around 35% average. And it's also made with rice and koji fermentation, but the ingredients can be rice or barley, sweet potato, sesame, brown sugar. So it's a different ingredients, and because they the way that they make, you can really taste that the ingredients. Mm-hmm. So that's a big two major difference.
Wow, got it. So do you think them both being national drinks, but does it vary regionally more so, where the harvest is available across the country, and that's kind of what influences?
Yes and no. So sake is pretty much, Japan is, I forget, I don't want to be wrong in the geography, but majority of Japan is mountain. So there's a lot of beautiful water source in Japan. So sake is actually made from everywhere. I don't exactly know how many breweries are there, but there's a sake breweries everywhere, and shochu as well. But the tendency of the shochu sits more on the southern islands. So it's a warmer climate. Of course, the food culture is a little different, and it probably came more from the China before, when things were starting to communicate. Right. So but tendencies, you'll find more shochu in the southern islands and more sake in the main islands, but there's breweries and spirits everywhere.
Got it. Yeah, that's really interesting. Just because when you mentioned that, the elements that are distilled when it comes to the shochu, it got me thinking, well, does that vary regionally or traditional culture? So that's really interesting to learn. That there is a bit of regional significance to that, but that the entire country, like you said, it's the national drink. So it's everyone knows it, but they know where where the specialty of brewing or distilling it is. If we get into a bit of travel, right? So you mentioned there in DC, which is so lucky and amazing because all the embassies and everything is there. And so just being in the thick of that and being able to be part of the community and the Japanese culture. But if we talk about travel to Japan, where and when have you last been? And what are some of your favorite things to do there?
From home, yeah. Well, because of COVID, I haven't been back home, which is killing me. But when I do go home, I am originally from Kyoto, Japan. Which is, if you imagine like a temples and shrines and beautiful gardens and, like a little narrow streets with the old houses, that's Kyoto pretty much.
Wow.
Very, very traditional place. And so there is nothing like home. So I absolutely, when I do go visit Japan, that is the place that I will always go. But because I started this business, sake business, like I mentioned, I am dying to learn more about just like what you're doing from the each, specialists. I would love to hear the story from the brewers themselves in making their sake, what kind of philosophies are in there. I think that will make it more genuine and authentic when I'm talking about their sake. So I am dying to go visit every breweries that I carry to start with, and then to really understand and be able to tell the stories. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's every one of them has a story. I mean, like and they have a craft and a specific way of making these things, which is so great. And it's I'm amazed at the selection that you offer. And if we get a little bit into, I had one more question about the travel, but if we think about the types of rice, what's kind of an easy way to for people to understand kind of the differences, because clearly there's several.
Yeah. So the categories, if you look at my website, you'll see like Junmai Ginjo, Junmai Daiginjo, and Junmai. So all that is a the milling of the rice. So if you think about the rice, the sake rice looks a little different from what the rice that you normally eat. The starches are more concentrated in the center, and the other portion is covered. And so when you see the Junmai sake, means literally it translates pure rice, meaning that is only made with the rice and water. And then also what it means is that rice is only milled up to 40%. So like a 60% or more is remained from the rice. But more you shave down to that core starch, the cleaner the sake starts to taste. So the flavor becomes more floral. When you sip into the sake, it's more smooth to drink. So a lot of the people who are not used to sake might enjoy starting from this kind of a sake first, because it's very easy to drink and very refreshing. And but when it goes, Junmai Daiginjo is smallest, milled smallest, and then Junmai Ginjo is like about 60% or lower, so it has a little bit outer layer. And then Junmai category it has even more layer left, meaning this outer layer, more the outer layer is left, there's a lot more added flavor remaining from the rice. So you would taste a little bit more heavier or maybe robust, mushroomy, earthy sort of a flavor. So even if you, just like a wine, for example, like you have a Pinot Grigio to like really heavy Chardonnay, and same thing with the wine, Pinot Noir to Malbec, for example. So the sake is also, if you think of Daiginjo as more of a Pinot Grigio, and then, Junmai category is more like a heavier Chardonnay or even more. It's definitely tastes different, but you could think of it like that.
Got it. Wow. That's amazing to know that there's so many. There's it looks like over 20 or more. So thank you for that. For that education and to understand, the meaning behind it.
So wine, for example, has a regional terroir, like the certain grapes comes from certain region. For sake, there is no terroir. So the rice is grown in many different places, and they actually get the rice from, the brewer's choice. And some brewers, the tendency, maybe the northern Japan in the colder places, the fermentation process is slower, so it tend to be more cleaner sake, but also the water is maybe soft or hard water that makes a difference as well. So but the rice itself is fairly diverse, and then some brewers might, the regionally northern brewer might be a little more cleaner versus southern brewer might be a little heavier, but of course that's a general category, and there's always an exception. More I start selling sake, I really do feel more important to really introduce sake not just as a beverage, but the whole story behind it. And when I sell these items, I personally feel like I'm introducing the part of the culture or the story of this brewery, instead of just introducing the beverage. And so I do want to gain the trust from the brewers that I can be their storyteller, and I would love to try to carry that on. Yeah.
So if we go and if you're thinking about kind of the brewers, right, and you think of all the different rices and the milling behind it and all the variety that you offer in the store right now, it looks like there's over 100 items. What do you feel in terms of what about Japan is evoked through the senses mostly?
So the sake is really like so like I said, it's made from rice and water, and it has so much varieties of flavor, even though it's only made from rice and water, and it all comes from the precise millings and of course the making of the brewmasters, really years of experience and in making sake. And each brewmasters are very different. Some sakes are very strong in their statement, and some sake is very subtle. And some brewmasters wants to be beside the food, not to go above or fight against, or but then some sake makers wants to really be addition to the cuisines, and so it's a very very different. But when it comes down to sake is rice and water, and what does rice does not go with, right? Rice goes with so many different things. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you think about risotto, you have a rice with cheese, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of cross-cultural things that we in the newer generations are trying out, where the typically the sake was drank in certain categories of people in Japan, but new sort of globally they want to try out with a different cuisines, pair it with the cheese, pair it with a fried chicken, pair it with a grilled barbecue, and we are just constantly discovering how well it goes with varieties of things, so food. So definitely appreciation, the capacity is so big. So when people tendency like I think like maybe 40 years plus years ago, in America, wine was red or white, But now people know within the red, I like Pinot Noir, or I like, Merlot. And sake is still, in many places, it's changing little by little, but in many places, is it hot or cold? But there are so many different categories of flavors that you can enjoy, and people are just starting to discover that. And at the same time, I would love to try to introduce sake to people as more of a beverage that they can have a good time with, not just open just with a sushi and sashimi. It can go beyond. It could go with the Doritos, olives and sake. It has so many potentials. So I maybe I didn't answer your question, but that's something that I would love to keep sharing.
Yeah. And in a way you did, but in a very unique way, because this is what you want to evoke even more through the senses.
Yes.
Yeah. And for people to know that there's so much more behind Japan than, like you said, whether, is it hot or is it cold? And so that takes the education and people to be brave enough to come out of their comfort zone and to try it, and so you're, like I said, you're well on your way in doing that. And so you're going to take it beyond just the sight or the taste. That's great. That's so great. I love your story, and I want to encourage everyone to check out your website and to get to know beyond this talk, really the multidimensional way that they can experience sake and shochu, and really get to know more about Japan through that. So thank you so much, Reiko, for sharing that with me and with everyone.
Sure. Absolutely.
I love it. So that's
and then I started to do it just kind of spontaneously happened, but something similar to what I talked about. I do a private virtual events time to time. So for people who wants to introduce, who wants to, if you're a person who will go to the Japanese restaurant and look at the sake menu and don't know really how to choose one sake from this menu, or you just, when you are asked what kind of sake do you like, and you just don't know how to answer that question, like what to answer, where with how to in wine. So for it's a very, very basic thing, plus the cultural background, like I shared with you, with the just the overall general very basic of sake. I start to do it in a smaller group of people and sip the sake together, and that has been one thing that I'm want to add as a menu in my website.
Well, then we'll encourage everyone to check out your website, look out for that, and to sign up for updates, and then they'll be able to keep an eye on those. And like I said, you're focused on telling that story and telling the story of the breweries, and so they can get to know more there. So thank you so much.
Thank you.